All right. So this is another episode of Movies in Minutes. This week I have my future cousin Danny on. Danny, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm glad that you asked me to join.
Of course, I've had a handful of people on, but not every one of them are crazy movie people like you and me. You know,
Hmm.
so I mean, it's always fun when I get to have people on that I know actually watch movies, pay attention, like have like good opinions about like what they're watching. Not to bash any of my previous guests if any of you are watching, but Um, the first thing I always ask people when I have them on, though, before we get to talking about what we're gonna, talk about today, is what kind of movies do you like?
Well, Nabil, I think you know the answer to this, but I will say it for
I
the
might.
audience. I'll
hmm
say it for the
I
audience
might.
anyway.
I might. hmm
Mostly I watch horror movies, so I like scary movies.
I'm shocked. I'm so shocked.
That's not what you were expecting, right? And that's really what I will go to the majority of the time. Also thrillers and
Okay.
suspense, but yeah.
hmm So, I mean, even when you don't go to the theater, though, I get it that horror is like the top of the list. Are there any of the ones that like you'd sit on the couch and like watch, knowing that you're just sitting home and it's just on streaming or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, like if I'm just gonna have something on that
hmm
maybe I'm not fully paying attention to, it's probably gonna be
hmm
comedy. I'll have something on in the background. I like to put on like some favorites from like the 2000s or the late 90s as
Okay.
far as comedies go.
hmm
It's nostalgic.
That's fair. That's totally fair. But so horror wins your heart. I got it, 100%. And I made sure this week when I asked to have you on that I was going to have at least one horror movie to talk with you about. But we'll save that one. We'll save that one till the end because that's the order that I sent them to you in. Um, what was the first trailer I sent you for today?
You sent me, it wasn't the Meg, it was Wild something. Wild
Um,
Dreams, Dreamin' Wild.
Dreamin' Wild. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So what did that trailer make you think the movie was about?
So the trailer makes me think that it is like some sort of music
hmm
um biopic. Do you know what I mean?
hmm
Like it is
Oh,
clearly
totally.
about musicians. Although I will be honest, I
hmm
didn't know the musical group that
hmm
the movie is about. Um
hmm
which I do like a lot of like classic rock, but I was
hmm
surprised I didn't know the two that
Right?
make up this group.
Yeah.
Um,
So
looks good though.
no, okay. So funny story. It's funny because I didn't even like pick up on it at first that it was a biopic when I watched the trailer myself before I saw the movie. I just thought it was like fictional. Like they came up with a story about these two brothers that like recorded, when they were teens and then they just never hit, and then it catches on later in life. But they're actually, like you said, like it's a biopic. They're real. They're the Emerson brothers.
Yeah.
Because I thought to myself, oh, it's like the Isley brothers, but they're like spoofing them or something, and apparently not. And this is like
Right.
based on a true story of
Based on a true
two bro.
story. And that
Yeah.
that seems cool. Like, and
hmm
again, I don't know their music, but it
hmm
looks to be like a well done movie and it has really big name actors. So that was
hmm
promising.
That was definitely the bigger draw for me. And once I did realize it was a biopic, one of the cool things about it is, a lot of times when you watch a biopic, if you kind of know the story already, you're kind of just like, okay, I know Elvis like lived, he got big, he
Yeah.
died from abuse or whatever. It's cooler when you have like no knowledge about the people because it's really like surprises all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what this one does because you're just like no fucking clue who these guys are. What's gonna happen?
Right. Yeah, I have no idea where that's going. So,
It was a big dynamic of one of the two brothers is really really talented, and the other one's just kind of there to play drums, be his like backup.
okay.
And basically it's just like a bunch of hipster indie people like find their records and kind of make them popular, and they don't even know that like they're popular until somebody comes scouting and being like, you're the guys, right? Like, what are you talking about? You're the Emerson brothers from like the 80s. Like, yeah, from the 80s.
From the
Not
80s,
now.
yeah,
We
when we
don't
were
do,
teenagers. And so,
yeah, we
do
do
you
nothing
know, like,
now.
when were they found? When were they actually discovered? Because it didn't say that in the preview, obviously.
It gives you, and I mean, they do their best to not give you like actual years when you're watching it, but it felt
Okay.
like 2010s. It
Oh, okay.
definitely felt like the internet's a thing. People are sharing this stuff online, but you didn't see a lot of people running around with like smartphones. So
Okay.
it was contemporary for sure, though. So there's that. So given some of that information, do you think it's something that you would watch?
Yes, that's the type of movie, and
Hmm.
maybe I'll give you like a helpful ranking of like, will I go
Hmm.
see it in theaters? Will I rent
Yes,
it?
exactly.
Will I
Yeah,
wait till it's free? Like that's
100%, a
my
hundred percent.
ranking.
What do you got?
Probably gonna, I feel like I would, honestly, I think I might wait till that one's free. Because thinking about the other ones on the list, that's my
Hmm.
answer for this one.
Yeah. I really didn't think it was a bad movie. Like out of five, I think this one was like a 3.5. Because again, it was a solid like, I don't know what's gonna happen, and that's a good thing in a movie. You don't want it to be predictable. Um, but at the end of the day, it's a story about a couple of brothers just making music. So it's
Right,
not breaking any banks or charting to the top of the Oscars or anything.
right,
So.
exactly.
But yep, all right, that's fair. I think we're kind of on a similar page on this one. So the next one is definitely a for sure ridiculous movie. If you've ever seen these type of movies. But what was our number two for today?
It was the Meg, but the second
Mhm.
one,
The Meg 2, The Trench.
the trench. That's it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that one looks good. I'm a sucker for those type of big budget shark movies, yes, but also just like big
Hmm.
budget creature features. So it could be a shark, it
Hmm.
could be an alligator, it could be an anaconda, whatever it is.
Hmm.
I do like those kind of movies. I think they're so
Hmm.
fun, especially when
Hmm.
they have like an actual studio budget behind it.
Right, right. And I mean, based on what you saw, did you have, I mean, on the one hand, I don't know that it matters 100%, but did you get a sense for what you thought the story was about based on what you saw?
Yeah, so it
Okay.
looks like they know that the Meg or Megs, if there's multiple of them, exist, but they
Hmm.
like get to this point so
Hmm.
deep into the ocean that it's like uncharted territory, and it is
Hmm.
truly a trench or an abyss of sorts where there's sea creatures nobody has ever seen before, including
Hmm.
this massive megalodon.
Hmm.
That
Totally.
look cool.
Um, and I think the B side to that too is like especially when you see some of the like crazy stuff going on in that trailer. Um, I mean they get out. I mean they get topside, and they start wreaking havoc, right, to like the normal populace. Um, so two questions on this though. Have you seen the Meg 1?
Yes. Yeah.
You did. Okay. So I mean like I had watched it just before the two because I hadn't seen it before. Um, and so I guess two. I know you said creature feature. Would you consider this horror or
Um, Shark movies are tricky because I feel like there a lot of people would consider them horror, like starting with
mm,
Jaws, but
yeah.
this one is so action packed. I might say this is more of like a horror comedy or a horror
Hmm.
action than
Hmm.
a straight horror movie.
I almost like throw this one into like an adventure movie category because I mean like you
Yeah.
could have horror moments, you got the action, you got the slapstick stuff. Sometimes it's just they just kind of all throw it in one pot and just let it go. Um, One thing I noticed about the original Meg versus this one, and I mean this is gonna be maybe it's a hot take. You're gonna have to watch it and let me know what you think since you've already seen the first one. I think the first one was a little bit slow. Like in a movie with sharks and action, I don't need a whole lot of story. I want you to
Yeah.
show me the sharks doing crazy shit. And I think it took like half of number one before they were really dealing with them. Number two takes maybe 5 minutes before we get
Okay.
to it. And I think that's a vast improvement on one because just give me the sharks. Give me the sharks doing the shark stuff.
Right. Right.
Um, the other thing about this one, and I try to avoid like heavy spoilers when I talk to people, especially if I don't know yet if you're gonna see it, but um, I think I wouldn't have called this one the Meg 2. I'm
Mm.
not to say that they're not in it, but you already kind of pointed out spot on. You see a ton of other sea creatures that nobody's ever seen before, and the movie. spends like maybe like just a little bit more time with the Megs than everything else, but they're
Okay.
dealing with other stuff too.
So
I
it's like a sea creature, like yeah, it's a bunch of sea creatures.
I almost would have called it. You know how? Did you ever see that Saw spinoff like Spiral? And it was
Yeah.
like Spiral from the book of Saw. Would have
Yeah.
been like The Trench, a Meg movie.
Yeah,
Like,
that makes sense. That makes a lot of
but
sense. And
yeah.
also, like to your point about creature features not
Hmm.
getting right into the said creature, I think it's
Hmm.
interesting when you look back at when you look back at some of our big adventure
Hmm.
movies like that, like Jurassic
Hmm.
Park or Anaconda,
Hmm.
which are admittedly older movies, but
Hmm.
in both of those movies, you don't get to the dinosaurs and you don't get to the snake until way later in the movie.
And those were really good movies. I see where you're going, and you're right. I mean, in Jaws is another one where like
Jaws, it takes forever. But then
there
as
was
they
build
do their
up.
sequels,
Hmm.
that's when you start getting into like it's right
Hmm.
there. It's within the first 10 minutes.
I think part of the problem based on like when we live now, because we've had those movies like what you mean, like Jurassic Park and Jaws, and they're just like all classics that kind of did the opposite than this, is like we've lived through like Sharknado or like other or Cocaine Bear, and it's just
Oh
kind of
God.
I'm kind of at a point where like I wouldn't expect like a movie like The Meg to be as good as Jaws, not to like shit on it. I mean, Jason Statham's great, but I think that there's a movie like that's probably never going to be a classic. So like I don't hold them as to a high as high a standard as I would like Jaws or Jurassic. But
Yeah.
I like that point of view, and that's 100% right. Like those ones were slow burns, and they were good slow burns. They hold up. Like you go back and you see
Yes.
like Ice Cube or and gee, I don't know, like I can't think of any of the big names from Jaws, but you know them like
Yeah,
when you see
yeah.
them, you're like, yeah, like okay, you guys did good showing me like the character growth of these guys before we started seeing Jaws come up and getting
Right.
swimmers.
I think
So,
like when you think about those movies, A, it was a
hmm.
different time. And
Hmm.
so people had more patience. But those were
Hmm.
like a master class in how to build suspense in an adventure movie.
a
And the
hundred percent.
movies we get today are like less about building that suspense and more about like the effects and instant gratification and like we're gonna see this massive shark and it's gonna
Hmm.
be a jump scare.
And I think they know too, like, back then, you know, if they were gonna give us the slow burn with like the character growth, if you're doing it in a right way, that's fine. Like, it'll serve the story. But if you're giving us like real unnecessary backstory, like kind of in like the Meg one where it's just like, oh, well, something bad happened in Jason Statham's past, so he's you know, like hanging out at the edge of the world because he doesn't want to be around anybody. Like, but are we gonna see? Is any of this have anything to do with the actual
Right.
story?
Are you gonna connect
No.
it back? Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
that's
fair.
fair. Do you think you would go see the Meg too, or how
Um,
does this rate on the three-tier list here?
this is probably going to be one I will definitely rent this.
Okay.
If my fiance wanted to see it in
Hmm.
theaters, I would go, but
Uh-huh.
we'll rent it for sure.
All right. All right. In my infinite OCD, will probably get it regardless of the fact that I didn't read like a five-star movie, but I still enjoyed it because of the fact that I already have Meg one, so it's like
You got to have
gotta
it in the
have it on the digital shelf, yeah.
collection.
So if you guys don't rent it, you know where you'll find it.
Yep. I'm sure he's
Um,
waiting on that.
so number three, I'm gonna kind of like I'm gonna like I don't know cheat on this one a little bit, and I'm gonna tell you that this one was my favorite this week.
Yeah,
Um, but I'm curious on your opinion. Number three was the last voyage of the Demeter.
right.
Had you already seen the trailer before I sent it to you?
I had not seen the trailer, but I had seen a teaser for this movie
Okay.
already because I
Okay.
follow a lot of
Yeah.
horror
Mhm.
Instagrams. And so
Oh
I
yeah, and
saw this one get announced.
that's why I thought for sure like this one was probably would have already been on your radar. But so what do you think this is about? it's not a, I don't think it's a spoiler to tell anybody that this is a Dracula movie, but I don't
Right.
think it's not your typical Dracula movie. But what
Right.
did you think?
I think when people think Dracula, they
Mhm,
think Transylvania, they think
mhm,
castles or caves
mhm,
with his bats, whatever,
mhm,
something like that. You don't
mhm,
usually think of Dracula or vampires on a ship. And so
mhm,
they took the Dracula, it seems like they took the Dracula premise
mhm,
and they are bringing us along for like a ride of like, well, what if we
mhm,
did Dracula, but instead of a
mhm,
castle, he is being transported from maybe he's on his way to Transylvania, but like how did he
mhm,
get there? Who brought him there?
mhm,
Or how did he get
mhm,
out of the places that we typically know him to be in? And so that's like
mhm,
an interesting take to see like what happened to the people that met him
mhm,
along the way.
mhm. That is a good take for it. So I don't know how many people going into this will know it. I mean, I think it'll be based on if you ever read the novel, but the original Dracula novel. So when he is supposed to be going from Transylvania to London because he buys property in London, but he's got to get there. In the book, he charters the Demeter to bring him,
Okay.
but the book literally talks about the Demeter over like 2 pages. Like it's
Huh.
like he charters the Demeter, and him and all his cargo is on the ship. They don't know he's on the ship. They just think they're bringing cargo to London. And all the book says is as the Demeter, makes port in London, the ship is empty. And it's like very ominous. They don't tell you much. So they had a lot of creative liberty to be like, all right, well, what can we do knowing like there's not a whole lot of like details
What?
about this voyage?
Right. But they could kind of make it their own.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they did. Again, I don't want to spoil, much of anything, but I will say that this was a really interesting take on Dracula. When you think about Dracula, are there any like particular like tropes or like common things you look for in Dracula, like just when you see him in anything?
Yeah, I mean, like as far as your traditional thinking of the monster that is Dracula, I think
Mhm.
there's been a lot of takes. But
Exactly.
what I think of,
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember the name of this movie. It's a very
Mhm.
popular Dracula movie.
Ooh.
But there's one where they show him like in his regalness, which is how we normally think of him, like with the cape and his fancy
Mm-hmm.
brooch and all of that. And he's like distinguished. But then whatever this movie is I'm thinking of, they also later show him being like a hideous creature and it's like very scary. And so
Mm-hmm.
you could see from the preview with
Mm-hmm.
this movie that we're discussing today, like
Mm-hmm.
they're taking the stance of like this is Dracula when he is like bearing all. You know what I mean? Like he's ugly, he is running
Mm-hmm.
around presumably naked and he is like a creature and he's scary and he's not this distinguished like up on his high hill castle kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you like picked up on all that. That's all very much in line with what you're gonna see when you see this.
Cool.
Um, like they do a really good job in the trailer of not really showing you much of him. I think there's like one kind of like POV shot of like him like kind of looking down like on the deck of the ship, and you kind of see that he's like monsterish, but they kind of avoid showing you much of anything else, which I'm really happy about because like through the voyage you kind of see him in different various like monster states, and it kind of changes over
That's
the
what I'm
course of the
thinking.
voyage.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. In fact, the distinguished regal thing, you see for like 5 seconds in the movie total, I would say. It's very much monster versus man in this.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we don't get to see much of with Dracula. It's almost always like I'm the man, but I can turn into the monster when I need to.
Right.
So I thought it was a really like refreshing thing to see that is he really the man and the monster's an option, or is it the other way around?
Yep.
Um,
I know you
no
don't
one
see
really.
him a lot like that. You like just
Mm-hmm.
kind of being like a creepy bat sort of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
being. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a scarier take to me. And I think that's what you need with like an audience like today. Like the
Mm-hmm.
typical traditional universal horror like monsters,
Mm-hmm.
that's not as scary anymore. Like they definitely have their place and as they should.
Mm-hmm.
But people aren't going to get scared with the Wolfman and Dracula and
Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein. So you got to
Yeah.
up the ante.
And I think they really did. What's really funny too is I know they've been trying for a couple of years. Like Universal really wants to get in on this like connected universe game the way like Marvel and DC do it.
Oh,
And they tried to do they did a Dracula Untold like 12 years ago maybe, and then they did a Mummy movie with Tom Cruise, and that was supposed to really like start making like a connected monster universe, and that movie like sucked. Like it was bad.
yeah, yeah, I
And
know.
and and then Universal was just like, you know what, never mind. And honestly, they really need more movies like this where they're not trying to connect and then you can connect them later. Kind of like Marvel did. Like Marvel, I don't think planned it originally and then after that they're
Right.
like, "Oh, all right. Good. Good. Let's do it this way."
Yeah, they figured it out later, but I agree with you. You need to look at them individually first and give them their
Hmm.
own backstories and give them their own lore. And
Hmm.
then later on, I'm sure there's ways
Figure
to
out the
connect
connective
them.
tissue. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. By the way, the Dracula movie that I was thinking of was Bram Stoker's Dracula from
Oh,
the
oh,
90s.
okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that one is like one of the most faithful adaptations because the
Yes.
novel was Bram Stoker.
Yes.
So, and I don't even know. I don't. It's been a really long time since I saw that one. That was the one with Gary Oldman as Dracula.
Yes. And he was
Mm.
scary at the end there. Like that was
He
creepy.
he was creepy in the whole thing. Like some dude tries to come and sell him real estate, and he's got like these giant buns for like hair. I would
Yes.
just I would just be like, I'm sorry, I picked the wrong house. I gotta go one
You're
door down.
you're weird looking. I'm not feeling this.
Nope.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
So how's this one rate on our scale?
This is one I would definitely go see in theaters. Like if I had the time,
Mhm.
this is one I would pay to go see for sure. It's up my alley.
I think of the three we talked about too, and it's kind of a toss up because the Meg is like definitely trying its best to use like the visual medium. Seeing the giant sharks jumping around isn't as fun on the small screen. But I think of the two, this one is a better use of like the big screen with like the water, the ship, the weather, the like
That
all
makes
the tights,
sense.
all of it, like the sitting in the dark theater when like the dark scary things happen. Yeah, I mean, if I have to like say to people, "Hey, go to the theater for something this week," this is the one.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely
um,
want to see this.
and I'm gonna be. This is your homework. I'm curious to know what you think of it when you do see it, because if it's one that you're interested in, I want to know. If we were on the same page about it being good or not.
Yeah, and I think Brandon is going to like it too because for all listening, Brandon's my fiance, and because what the main actor, who is the main actor in that movie? I'm about to Google it because I forget his name, but Brandon really likes this actor. Hold
I
on.
didn't recognize Dracula or the main the protagonist. There is a guy who's been in a lot of other things, though. His name's David Dastmalchian.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
recognize him too,
yeah,
actually.
he's like the ship's first mate, so you do see him like a fair amount.
Yep,
But
I recognize him. But the
I
guy I'm
think
talking about is Corey. I just Googled it. Corey Hawkins, and he's from
oh
like
yeah, he's the protagonist.
yeah. So he was in Straight Outta Compton
Hmm.
and um Black Klansman,
Mm-hmm, hmm.
24, like the show 24.
Yeah,
He was in
he's
like a
he's
Walking.
definitely he's a great protagonist. Also, I think the captain was from Game of Thrones.
Okay. So I'm
Hmm.
not a huge game. I've never watched Game of Thrones, but I bet you people who have recognize him
Hmm.
right
Yeah, I mean, because he does a fair amount of the like narration. Like you'll hear stuff about like because he's writing like a captain's log that ends up showing up at one point too. But like as he's writing it, you hear him, and he's got like a good like narrator voice. So,
away. Okay.
um, besides the three that we talked about today, are there any other movies that are like on the horizon for you that you're like particularly excited about?
Yes, there
What you
is.
got? What you got?
So there's this one that I've been wanting to see in theaters, but I just haven't had time. It is a horror movie. It's an A24 movie called Talk
Talk to
to
Me.
Me. Yes.
I will gladly send you my episode about Talk to Me, but Talk to Me is my contender right now for best horror movie of the year.
I'm telling you, I keep hearing that. Like people are raving about this horror movie, and I'm like, I haven't seen it yet, and it's driving me crazy.
I'm really excited. So I got to see that one in a 3 week early screening, and it was great. And I thought I was super worried because it's Australian brothers are the directors, and the entire cast is Australian. So I kept thinking to myself, shit, this is going to be an indie movie, and it's not going to hit like mainstream theaters, and people are going to miss out on it. And I'm glad it's in most places. Like,
Because I think because
um,
A24 picked it up and they're a big distributor or
yeah.
producer.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not sure if I'm labeling them correctly, but
hmm
they they made sure like it got marketed and that people knew about it.
I can't think of anything else on the horizon that I think is going to beat this one out this year. I mean, again, this Demeter movie was great, but like, if we have to compare the two, ultimately this is a Dracula like creature movie, and I don't really have anything to compare Talk to Me to. It's just like a urban legend, like Australian horror film that doesn't really follow most of the tropes that you expect from a horror movie. It turns left a lot, like, and I was really happy about that. Like anytime I was like, oh, they're gonna do the sappy like thing, and then they don't. I'm like, oh,
Right, the
wow,
predictable thing,
okay,
whatever it
yeah,
is. Yeah, I know
yeah,
everybody keeps saying it's like the best horror movie of the year. And
mhm,
that's crazy because most of the time, we don't even get what our best horror movies end up being usually until the
mhm,
fall. Like they usually hold them September,
mhm,
October. You've got the whatever
mhm,
the biggies are supposed to be. And I know
mhm.
this year, like they're doing that remake of The Exorcist. And frankly, I'm already hearing that people are not very excited about it. So,
Well, it's not a remake. It's like it's kind of like Scream 5. It's like a requel. So like
yes,
they treat it like I think the actually it's more like the Halloween 2018
where it
because I
picks
think
up
it
off the
yeah,
first
like
one.
it
Yeah.
yeah, like it ignores all the other sequels.
Yep. Yep.
Um I'll give it a shot. What else is there? There's like Saw like 20. It's just like
I will watch that though. Like I will.
yeah, yeah, but I just like that's another one where they're like, okay, this is the 10th Saw movie, but it takes place somewhere between like
I
2 and 3, and
think
like,
it takes place
just
after
stop,
two.
stop.
Brandon's excited about that one though. And like I'm hearing like some initial excitement for it actually. People are saying that
Sure. I mean, we
there's
haven't had
reasons
one in
to
a
think
couple
it
of
will be good.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
but
people are saying they think it will probably be pretty good.
hot, hot take. I mean, they could just like set it after all the others. I mean, weird idea, but you
I
know,
know, but like they don't people like that's not the move anymore. So it's always got to be,
yeah,
slipped in between somewhere else in the franchise.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's the greatest way to get new people in, right? You know, make sure they go watch the other 10 before the next one comes out because it's
Right,
very realistic.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I'm always on the hunt though for new scary movies, so I'll be checking it out. And
mhm.
Saw is just such a like 2000s nostalgic one for me.
Yeah,
It's definitely
yeah.
not a comfort movie, but it is a nostalgic movie. And then
Mhm.
I do like to see what they do with it.
Sure. I mean, I'm always like looking at the new traps and then like just the various like parts of my body, like seeing the thing that's like being destroyed. I'm like, just like, oh, it hurts.
Yeah, yeah.
Just looking at it. Yeah. So, all right. Well, guess what? That's it. We're done, man. It's been
Sweet.
great. You were a great guest. I'm happy you were on. Again, you got to let me know when you watch Meg 2, I mean or any of them, whatever
Yes.
you think. I'm always happy for the feedback to know like, hey, this was as good as you said it was, or Nabil, this was dog shit. What are you thinking? I'll take it all. So,
No, we'll definitely be watching all of these, and I will
mhm,
definitely let you know what I think, including Talk to Me and
mhm.
including the Meg and including Last Voyage. So they're all on the list. We will be getting to them.
Awesome. I'm so happy to hear it. Thanks again, Danny. I'll
Yeah,
see you soon,
yeah.
all
Thanks
right?
for having me.
Yeah, of
Bye.
course, guys.
Talk
It's
later.
been Movies in Minutes again. Have a good one.